Okay, let's unpack this. We got our hands on some documents, some source material, and it details something, well, pretty incredible, and frankly, utterly bizarre.
Yeah, bizarre is maybe underselling it. It kicked off, you won't believe this, with what sounds like the most boring thing ever, an accounting audit.
Right, in this quiet little coastal city in Poland. This was back in, what, 2019?
That's it, 2019. So picture it, right? Fluorescent lights, stale coffee, someone's just buried in spreadsheets, late nights probably.
Yeah.
Just looking for, the usual discrepancies, errors.
Standard financial stuff,
Except what they stumbled on wasn't just a typo or some kind of clever bookkeeping. It just didn't belong at all. It seemed to break the rules.
Not just accounting rules either, like basic rules of, well...
reality. Pretty much. It actively contradicted, how numbers are supposed to work.
Yeah.
Especially numbers representing money.
And the source material we have, it actually gives it a name. It dives deep into this thing they formally call the temporal financial anomaly.
Mm-hmm. And the initial spark, the first hint, came from these 3 companies. They were all connected somehow. And their invoices. That's where it got weird.
Invoices, I mean, that should be solid ground, shouldn't it? A number's a number, value in, value out. Simple.
Should be. But these numbers were flexible, fluid, unstable maybe, depending on how you interpreted the sequence of digits. The actual value seemed to shift.
And here's the kicker, right? It wasn't just random fluctuation.
No, not at all. It followed this incredibly precise, totally consistent, and completely inexplicable rule.
So that's the anomaly right there. You take one of these invoices, you look at the value written down the normal way, decimal, base 10, the way we all count money.
Right, you get amount A.
But then, and I need you to stay with me here because this is where it gets wild. The document claims if you take that exact same string of numbers.
It's the same digits.
Yeah, the same digits, but you interpret them using a different system, specifically hexadecimal, base 16.
Computers use a lot.
Right. When you do that, the value wasn't just different. It was exactly 60% more.
Every single time. A precise 60% increase. It's not a rounding error. It's definitely not some kind of fancy accounting trick.
The source is adamant. It's reproducible. A genuine phenomenon. They gave an example, didn't they?
They did. An invoice for, say, 100,000 Polish zloty, PLN. In decimal, that's, 100,000. Simple enough. But if that transaction, or maybe the system processing it, somehow interacted with a hexadecimal interpretation, it yielded 160,000 PLN.
Okay, let's be crystal clear on this because it's crucial. It's the absolute linchpin. The document isn't saying the number 100,000 converts to 160,000 if you just change the base. That's not it. That's standard math. Anyone can do that conversion.
Right, that's not the anomaly.
No, it's describing something about the financial system itself. When it interacts with this hexadecimal perspective on a value, the decimal amount is like a key.
And the hex view is the lock, or the gateway.
Exactly, a gateway. And passing the value through that gateway doesn't just, change how you write the number. It seems to actually generate or maybe access an extra 60% of value relative to the original decimal amount.
Precisely. The hexadecimal interpretation seems to trigger some kind of simple financial function, I guess. 100K becomes 160K, 200K becomes 320K, a million becomes 1.6 million. It's this universal multiplier, always 60%, always linked to base 16.
Just think about that for a second. What that implies. Every single transaction that gets touched by this hex viewpoint suddenly unlocks 60% more value out of thin air.
Well, not thin air, according to the document, but yeah, unlocks it.
And the source insists this isn't a bug. It's not a mistake someone made coding the system. It's a feature, reproducible every time with every transaction run through this hexadecimal gateway.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? There's a line in the document that's kind of chilling. It basically says, hey, check your invoices. Yeah, it sounds completely nuts, I know, but if this is even remotely real, are there hidden values lurking everywhere, just waiting for us to look at them through the right mathematical lens?
Which brings us right to the big question. Why hex? Why base 16? Of all the number systems, why that one?
And the document doesn't just shrug this off. It dives right in. It suggests that 16 isn't just some random number they picked. It describes it as, get this, a fundamental constant in temporal mechanics.
Whoa. Okay, so we just leaped way past accounting ledgers, temporal mechanics, time itself.
Yeah, we're way off the spreadsheet now. The source material tries to connect the dots, pointing out how base 16 keeps popping up in weird places throughout history.
Like where?
Well, some ancient civilizations apparently used base 16 or related systems for counting or astronomy. And then, fast forward, modern computer science is absolutely drenched in hexadecimal, right? Memory addresses, color codes online. It's everywhere in digital systems.
Okay, sure, but couldn't that just be coincidence? Humans developing useful math?
That's the standard view, yeah. But the document argues, no, this isn't just parallel development or, finding a convenient way to represent computer data. It's presented as evidence.
Evidence of what?
That maybe certain people or certain groups across history, maybe the folks designing ancient calendars, maybe the architects of early computers dealing with the deep structure of logic. Maybe they unknowingly brushed up against this deeper layer of reality.
Where base 16 isn't just math, it's fundamental to time.
That's the claim.
Yeah.
That they intuitively grasped, or maybe even glimpsed, that base 16 has this unique significance, a connection to how time actually works.
So hexadecimal. It's not just another way to write numbers down. In this model, the way the source describes it, it's more like a key or a channel. The document calls these points temporal bridges.
Temporal bridges, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Basically, the junctures, points where our normal, everyday, linear understanding of time, cause always comes before effect. It sort of breaks down.
Breaks down how? Like chaos.
Not necessarily destructive. The document says these bridges actually allow for something. Resource transfer across time streams.
Resource transfer across time streams, so that extra 60%.
It's coming from somewhere, and according to this source, it's coming from other timelines, from the future.
Which leads us into this totally mind-bending economic model they describe. Temporal economics, borrowing from the future. Literally.
Yeah, and this is where, anyone with a basic physics background starts screaming, conservation of energy, conservation of mass. You can't just magic 60% extra stuff into existence.
Right. Physics should just shut this whole thing down. But the document, it addresses this head on. It actually agrees you don't create energy or matter from absolute nothing.
Instead, it says the system. It bends the rules of conservation. It gets around them by borrowing.
Okay. Borrowing from where?
And here's the bit that really warps things. It's borrowed from futures that already exist.
Futures that already exist. Okay, now my brain hurts. That sounds like quantum mechanics, doesn't it? The many worlds idea.
Exactly. The source leans right into it. It references the whole concept that, maybe all possible futures exist simultaneously, like in a state of quantum superposition. Until we observe something, until a choice is made, and then reality collapses into just one definite timeline, the one we experience.
So the idea here is this hexadecimal system, this anomaly, it somehow reaches into that space of possibility.
Before the collapse happens, yeah.
Yeah.
It supposedly accesses these parallel futures while there's still potential. And what does it pull out? Resources. Value. That 60% bonus seems to be drawn specifically from timelines where things went really well.
Timelines where investments paid off huge, projects succeeded, wealth just grew and grew.
That's the implication. It taps into the successful outcomes that exist in potential.
Okay. This is where it starts to feel, terrifyingly exciting. The document uses this analogy, the compound interest of time.
Yeah, think about it. Forget borrowing from the bank. What would you do if you could borrow not just from your future self, but from the profits your future self already made on their smartest investments?
So imagine in some other timeline, I make some brilliant investment. It grows exponentially for, say, 30 years. Huge returns.
Right. And this system lets you access a chunk of that future wealth, that compounded growth, today, here, now, without waiting the 30 years.
The gains would be astronomical compared to the initial amount. You're getting the result of compound interest without living through the compounding time.
And the document claims this system does precisely that. Immediate access to future returns. It suggests it bypasses linear time for finance.
And it helps manage risk, right? Because you're borrowing from a future where things presumably worked out.
Theoretically, yeah. You're pulling from a successful timeline branch, so it's like hedging your bets across realities. Yeah. And it means exponential growth now without the wait.
It's like pulling realized value straight out of the probability fog of potential futures.
That's what the source insists is happening. That's where the 60% comes from. Value pulled from tomorrow, arriving today, and base 16 is the key that unlocks the door.
Okay, but a system like this, something literally bending time, messing with causality, borrowing from other realities, surely that needs some kind of management, control.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? It seems impossibly complex and potentially dangerous to just run wild. And the document agrees. It introduces the idea of, well, guardians, custodians of causality.
Guardians, like entities or forces.
It's a bit ambiguous, but it suggests forces or perhaps incredibly advanced autonomous systems. Think of them as stewards, maybe, making sure the whole thing doesn't implode. It describes two main types.
Okay, who's first?
The first one is called the Perception Horizon Guardian. And this one. This was fascinating and honestly a little creepy when you think about what it implies for us right now.
How so? What does it do?
Its job, according to the source, is to manage humanity's collective ability to perceive and, crucially, accept the truth about this whole anomaly. It's not about total secrecy, though.
It's not just hiding it.
No, the document makes a distinction. It's not just a sensor. It's more like a reality modulator.
Yeah.
It controls the rate of revelation. And its methods. They sound disturbingly familiar.
Such as?
Controlled information leaks. Disguised as, say, scientific breakthroughs. You know, gradual discoveries that slowly prepare humanity for concepts like parallel worlds, quantum entanglement acting instantly over distance, time being more flexible than we thought.
Wait a minute. So maybe some of these big physics announcements we hear about, maybe they aren't just random discoveries by brilliant scientists.
Maybe they're calibrated.
Yeah.
Little drops of truth fed out slowly, easing us into the idea that reality is way, way stranger and more interconnected than the everyday view. That's exactly what the source suggests.
Okay, that's unsettling. What else?
It also talks about reality anchors, physical places, like that specific street in Poland the audit mentioned. Places that serve as real, tangible proof the anomaly exists, but they're designed to look completely mundane on the surface.
So they ground the system in our world, but without screaming, hey, look, time travel finance happening here.
Exactly. And then there are cognitive filters. This guardian seems to ensure that most people, the vast majority, who stumble across evidence of this, they just dismiss it.
How?
As conspiracy theories. Coincidence, wishful thinking, delusion. It's like a built-in mental firewall for the masses to prevent, widespread panic or society just breaking down if the truth came out all at once.
Okay, this is where the paranoid definitely starts to kick in. Should we even be talking about this? I mean, are we being filtered right now? Are we supposed to be understanding this?
It's a valid question based on the source material. It also mentions things like date anomalies, deliberate tiny inconsistencies in records or dates.
Like the kind of thing an auditor might find.
And write off as a simple clerical error, plausible deniability, just like what might have happened in that 2019 audit that started it all.
So the goal of this Perception Guardian isn't just to hide it forever, it's to reveal it, but slowly. Manage the shock.
That's the description. Reveal it at a pace that prevents, and this is a direct quote, collective psychological collapse. Because, let's be real, if this was proven fact on the news tomorrow, chaos, absolute chaos.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so that's one guardian. Who's the other?
The second is the temporal guardian. If the first one manages our perception, this one manages reality itself. Its main job. Stop paradoxes. Keep the whole temporal financial system stable.
Preventing paradoxes. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Because if you're borrowing from the future, boom, paradox sitting, right? The grandfather paradox. But what if borrowing from your successful future stops that future from happening?
Exactly. That's the classic problem. So the temporal guardian's job list, according to the source, includes maintaining timeline integrity, stopping those kinds of causal loops.
Okay.
It's also responsible for something called synchronization, which the document describes as managing multiple versions of individuals existing across timelines.
Whoa, hold on. Multiple versions of me, of you, existing at the same time in different potential futures that this system is interacting with.
That's what it says. That's That's a lot to wrap your head around. The idea that you isn't just this single straight line through time.
That is profoundly weird. Okay, what else does this temporal guardian do?
It handles causal loop prevention, making sure that the necessary events actually happen in those other timelines to generate the resources being borrowed. Like ensuring the successful investment actually occurs in the future it's drawn from.
Right, gotta make sure the loan actually exists somewhere, sometime.
And maybe the most critical job, energy distribution. This whole process, pulling value or energy across dimensions, apparently generates immense temporal overflow. Waste energy maybe. Stress on the system.
Temporal overflow.
Okay. And if that energy isn't managed, if it builds up, what happens?
The document uses a phrase that definitely gives you pause. It says the guardian channels this overflow. Preventing reality tears. Reality tears. Okay. This is where it gets really interesting and yeah, maybe a bit frightening. We're not just talking about weird accounting anymore. This is manipulating the fabric of space-time.
Absolutely. And if the process messes up, if this temporal guardian fails to handle the energy, the source suggests reality itself could literally rip apart.
That puts the stakes incredibly high, way beyond just balancing the books.
It definitely recasts that initial audit, doesn't it? Those accountants weren't just finding number errors, they were accidentally poking at the edges of cosmic-level space-time engineering.
And the document goes further, describing the actual infrastructure behind this, the machinery, things operating outside our normal perception, machines beyond the horizon.
Right, and it claims, right now as you're listening to this, those machines are humming along somewhere, doing their thing, maybe just beyond our ability to see or measure.
Doing incredible, maybe terrifying work. What kind of machines does it talk about?
It names a few types. First up, temporal converters.
Converters, what do they convert?
They seem to be the main engines. Their job is to take that potential value, the stuff accessed via the hexadecimal gateway, the borrowed future resources, and turned it into tangible wealth or actual resources here in our present timeline.
How?
Apparently, they operate using principles of quantum uncertainty. But here's the part. Honestly, this next part kept me up for 3 nights after reading the document.
Uh-oh. What is it?
The crucial detail. The really, really weird condition about how these temporal converters work. They can only function properly when they are completely unobserved.
Unobserved, you mean? Like if nobody's looking?
Exactly. The very act of consciously observing them, trying to measure them, trying to pin down exactly what they're doing, it collapses their quantum state apparently, renders them useless, stops the conversion process.
Wait, this is where it gets really fucked up. Seriously, you can only get the benefit, that extra 60%, that borrowed future money, if you deliberately don't look at the machine making it happen.
That's the implication. It operates in the ultimate blind spot.
Yeah.
It works in the spaces and processes we aren't watching, aren't measuring. It's like it requires a lack of scrutiny to function.
That feels almost designed to prevent us from ever fully understanding or controlling it. You have to just trust the output, the effects, and not peek behind the curtain.
It certainly suggests that. It implies a system that inherently resists direct analysis. Then there are the linearity stabilizers.
Linearity stabilizers, what do they stabilize? Our timeline?
Pretty much. Their function is, relatively speaking, simpler. Just stop cause and effect from completely unraveling for everybody else. Maintain the illusion, or maybe the actual integrity, of time flowing in a nice orderly sequence for people not directly plugged into the anomaly.
So they keep things feeling normal even if there's weird time stuff happening nearby?
Yeah, they create these temporal buffer zones around the active sites, like that street in Poland. These zones make sure that even while deep temporal mechanics are going on, the local experience of time stays mostly linear, mostly predictable. Stops paradoxes from just popping up in your morning coffee.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. And then this next part kept me up for 3 nights. Reality generators, what on earth are those?
Yeah, this is maybe the most staggering claim in the whole document. These machines, they supposedly spawn alternate Earths.
Spawn alternate Earths? You mean like parallel universes?
Not just as a concept. The document claims they create real physical alternate realities, destinations.
Destinations for what?
For incompatible timeline energies. Remember that temporal overflow? Sometimes the energy or the potential value pulled from a future doesn't neatly fit back into our specific timeline. It's discordant, so it needs somewhere else to go.
And these machines just generate a whole new Earth for it.
That's the claim. A whole new, fully functional reality. And the document is absolutely clear. Each one generated is as real as our own. Not a simulation, not a shadow. Equal, valid.
Oh my God, why? Why do that?
Survival, apparently.
Why?
It's to prevent temporal pressure buildup that could shatter dimensions.
Shatter dimensions, the thought of our reality cracking apart because of too much temporal energy.
Yeah.
That's deeply unsettling.
Understatement of the year. So if the energy doesn't fit here,
Yeah.
shun it off to a brand new, perfectly good alternate Earth. It's like a cosmic safety valve, constantly bleeding off pressure by creating new universes.
An infinite supply of cosmic dumpsters for temporal waste.
Maybe. Or maybe reservoirs of potential. And the document suggests that sometimes we actually see evidence of this process, this energy transfer, this temporal stress. It calls it the red plasma phenomenon.
Ah, okay. Those weird red lights people sometimes report seeing in the sky that people argue about online.
Exactly. The source material flat out dismisses the usual explanations. It says forget weather balloons, forget swamp gas, forget standard atmospheric phenomena, definitely not conventional UFOs.
So what are they according to this?
Visible timeline conflicts, it says. Bursts of energy trying to find a compatible reality to integrate into. They're like warning lights, signaling temporal stress on the whole system. And sometimes, maybe, actual fleeting gateways opening up to these other Earths.
Gateways, like you could fall in.
It doesn't quite go that far, but it implies a thinning of the veil, maybe? And the source connects the dots. It says recent increases in these red plasma sightings globally suggest the system is processing way more energy than usual. Maybe unprecedented amounts.
Why? Any reason given.
It ties this ramp up to a specific date. It suggests the system might be gearing up, processing more energy, possibly in preparation for the 2027 revelation.
2027, that year keeps coming up, like some kind of target date.
Yeah, the document highlights it. It speculates 2027 might be the planned moment for a much wider disclosure.
Right.
Maybe when the Perception Horizon Guardian decides humanity is ready. Or maybe when the system requires it.
Why 2027 specifically?
It mentions the time elapsed since the 2019 discovery, 8 years. And 8 in hexadecimal is still 8, so it fits a base 16 pattern, suggesting it's part of some engineered temporal cycle. It also vaguely mentions alignment with cosmic cycles, but mostly it frames it as maybe the minimum time needed to prepare us psychologically, to let the reality sink in without causing total global meltdown.
So potentially just a couple of years from now, the whole game changes, the veil gets ripped back.
Potentially. Which brings us back to those other Earths, the alternate Earth network. We know the reality generators supposedly create them, but what are they like?
The document says, not copies, but equals, which is a heavy thought. Reality is born from every different choice, every path not taken here.
Yeah, realities where maybe this whole anomaly is common knowledge, or where technology took a completely different turn based on different discoveries. The source uses this phrase, every possibility finds expression.
Wow. That implies basically an infinite multiverse. Every single potential variation of our world exists somewhere equally real.
That's the picture it paints. And within this vast network of realities, the document introduces another concept, something that sounds almost spiritual, actually, the migration protocol.
Migration protocol, what's that?
It suggests there's some kind of underlying principle at play, something called universal harmony, that guides consciousness across these realities.
Guides it how? Like reincarnation? Or teleportation?
Neither, really. The document is careful. It says it's not physical death, it's not beaming somewhere. It's described as a gradual frequency alignment.
Frequency alignment, like tuning a radio.
Kind of. The idea is that your consciousness, your essence, over time, naturally starts to resonate more strongly with the specific timeline, the alternate Earth, where your unique potential, your deepest desires, your true nature, can be most fully realized.
So, artists find themselves drawn towards realities that value their art. Scientists gravitate to worlds with fewer limitations on discovery.
That's the idea. Everyone sort of drift towards their optimal timeline. The reality, that's the best fit for who they fundamentally are or could be.
And the document makes this huge claim, doesn't it? Almost utopian.
It does. No one is left behind, everyone finds their place. It suggests this cosmic sorting hat, ensuring every consciousness eventually lands in the reality best suited for it within this infinite network.
That is a staggeringly optimistic view, considering the potential for reality tears and paradoxes.
It is, and it leads directly to one of the absolute most provocative claims in the whole source document, the democratic time travel revolution.
Right, because usually time travel in stories is, you know, super secret.
Yeah.
Government labs, elite scientists, maybe some shadowy corporation controls it all.
Exactly, paradox police keeping everything locked down. But this document says, nope. This system is fundamentally different.
How so?
It claims it's inherently democratized. The access key isn't some complex machine only a few can build or operate. The mechanism is understanding hexadecimal.
Wait, seriously? Just the math?
Anyone understanding hexadecimal conversion can theoretically, and that's almost a direct quote, access these future resources, can participate in the temporal economy, can maybe even influence this reality selection process, can actively shape their journey towards their optimal timeline.
So the key to manipulating time and wealth across realities isn't hardware. It's a specific kind of mathematical literacy, a language.
A language that is, in principle, accessible to anyone willing to learn it. Everything you thought you knew about time, about money, about reality. The document basically says, throw it out. It's different.
Wow. And it all circles back, doesn't it, to that starting point, that Polish coastal city. The document points to a specific physical location there, an anchor.
Yeah, a specific street, reportedly named after the supposed architect of this whole system.
It's described as a focal point, right? A place where the veil is thin, where the temporal energy is concentrated.
Exactly. Most accessible.
Picture yourself walking down that street. The document details these consistent, frankly bizarre reports from people who spend time there.
What kinds of reports?
Time behaving strangely, hours feeling like minutes, or the other way around. People suddenly noticing intricate patterns everywhere, having flashes of insight into complex math or geometry they never understood before.
Like their brain just got an upgrade?
Kind of, and dreams. Really vivid dreams of being other versions of themselves, living entirely different lives in different circumstances.
And the source says this isn't just people freaking out or imagining things.
No, it claims it's a direct effect. Temporary exposure to this concentrated temporal energy. It supposedly expands your consciousness for a bit, lets you perceive things normally filtered out.
Things like other timelines.
Maybe. And the way it describes time itself on that street is fascinating. It doesn't say time speeds up or slows down. It says it flows deeper.
Deeper? What does that even mean?
It's hard to grasp, but it suggests you start perceiving multiple layers of time at once, like seeing the past, present, potential futures all superimposed somehow, seeing the underlying structure, not just the surface flow, like taking off 3D glasses you didn't know you were wearing.
That's a good analogy. Visitors report sensing probability shadows, feeling the echoes of choices they didn't make, feeling connected to those alternate selves the document talks about. Some even report getting fleeting glimpses of future memories, their own future memories.
It's like the boundaries just dissolve there, between potential realities, between past, present, future.
And then we found the smoking gun, or, at least a street that feels an awful lot like one. A real place you can supposedly go, where our solid reality seems to touch this other temporal financial dimension.
Okay, let's pull back for a second, try to grasp the scale here. If this temporal financial anomaly, this whole system described in the source document, if even a fraction of it is true, the consequences are just staggering. For everything.
Oh, absolutely. Economically, forget about it. It rewrites the entire playbook. Why wait years for investment returns if you can tap into the successful future outcome now?
Risk assessment becomes what? Peeking into parallel universes to see which bet pays off.
Potentially. And resource scarcity. If you can borrow resources from timelines where humanity solves scarcity or where resources are just abundant, what does scarcity even mean anymore?
And wealth. If anyone with the mathematical key can access this, like the document claims, it suggests this radical democratization. Everyone potentially tapping into the wealth generated by their own most successful possible future self.
Philosophically, though, it's an earthquake. It just shatters foundational ideas. Free will versus determinism. If all futures exist, are we choosing or just navigating? Picking a channel.
Identity. If there are countless versions of you across these alternate Earths, which one is the real you? Are you even an individual in the way we think? Or more like a distributed network?
And the ethics. Is borrowing from your future self okay? Is it stealing from another equally valid version of you who actually earned it? And our reality, is it special, primary, or just one random channel on a cosmic TV with infinite stations?
This raises an important question about literally everything we assume is solid ground.
Yeah, and scientifically, it demands a revolution. It implies conscious observation affects not just quantum particles, but the flow of time itself.
That math isn't just descriptive, it can be prescriptive. Like certain mathematical systems are actual gateways to manipulating reality.
That economic ideas, like borrowing, lending, interest, they somehow map onto the fundamental physics of space-time.
And information, future outcomes, future memories, can apparently travel backwards in time, which completely breaks causality as we know it.
And according to this document, this isn't just wild theory anymore. It claims that as of now, 2024, the system is humming along, active.
We're reportedly seeing more of those red plasma sightings globally, the signs of temporal energy transfer, more examples of these weird financial anomalies popping up, echoing that original Polish audit.
And these online groups, communities of timeline researchers, they're growing. people sharing stories, noticing patterns, feeling subtle shifts in reality they think are connected to all this.
The document basically frames this whole thing, this temporal financial anomaly, not as sci-fi, but as maybe the first successful working hack of space-time.
A preview of humanity's future, multi-dimensional existence.
It calls it an invitation, that's the word it uses, an invitation to consciously participate in selecting your reality. It uses these grand phrases, the democratization of divine powers.
The idea that every single person has the potential, through understanding this system, maybe just through understanding Hex, to guide themselves towards their best possible timeline. Not controlled by elites, but accessible.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with some absolutely huge, maybe uncomfortable questions based on what's in this source material. The document basically asks you directly, if you really could borrow from your most successful future self, knowing all the implications, would you do it?
And maybe the more unsettling follow-up question, given how the source describes its subtle background operation, are you perhaps already doing it? Without having a clue, is this system already running silently beneath the surface of our everyday lives, nudging things?
Wow. The document doesn't give the answers, does it? It just lays out the scenario and leaves the conclusion up to you. Whether it's real or just an incredibly elaborate fiction, it's a lot.
It really is.
So, if you happen to live near that Polish coastal city, maybe take a walk down that specific street they mentioned. Just see what happens. Pay attention, notice things. Time, patterns, your own thoughts.
And just know that this deep dive, we've covered a lot based on the source we have. But it feels like just scratching the surface, doesn't it? There are probably layers to this we haven't even touched on.
Oh, and one more thing. Almost forgot. The document mentions this right at the very end, like a little footnote. It claims that every time someone reads the source material, every time someone like us talks about it or you listen to this, it generates tiny micro fluctuations in the continuum.
Seriously, just processing the information affects things.
Apparently, so. Just something to chew on as you think about all this.